All right, let's dive into one of the most transformative and honestly, one of the most consequential periods in all of human history, the Age of Discovery. It's an incredible story of ambition, new technology, and violent collisions. And believe it or not, it all started with a craving for something most of us just have sitting in our kitchen cabinets. So, that's the big question we're tackling today. How on earth did a simple desire for things like pepper, cloves, and cinnamon trigger a chain reaction that led to brand new continents appearing on the map, the rise of global empires, and really the birth of the interconnected world we all live in right now? To get why Europeans were so desperate to set sail, you first have to picture the world back in the 15th century. Europe was, for all intents and purposes, kind of on the sidelines. It was on the edge of the map, cut off from the real centers of global wealth and trade. And this right here, this lays out the heart of the problem. All the good stuff, spices from Asia, silk from the East, it was all locked down. The overland trade routes were controlled by just a few powerful players. So by the time a pinch of pepper made it to, say, a kitchen in England, it had passed through so many hands, the Ottoman Empire, Venetian merchants, you name it, that its price was just astronomical. You gotta understand, this wasn't just about making your food taste better. Not at all. Spices were like the era's wonder drugs. They were crucial for preserving food before refrigeration. They were a huge part of religious ceremonies. I mean, they were both a status symbol and a necessity. So finding a new, direct route, this wasn't just about getting rich, it was about getting direct access to some of the most vital commodities on the planet. Okay, so Europe has this huge problem, right? They're locked out. But right around the same time, a revolutionary solution starts to emerge. A new set of tools was about to literally unlock the world's oceans for them. This was the trifecta, the real game changer. All of a sudden, you have the caravel, a new kind of ship that was faster, nimbler, and, this is the crucial part, could actually sail against the wind. Kind of essential if you ever want to make a round trip. Then you add the magnetic compass, which meant sailors no longer had to hug the coastline. And finally, you have maps that, okay, they weren't perfect, but they were just good enough to make someone brave enough to sail out into the big, empty ocean. But of course, technology is one thing, you need motivation. Now, publicly, the story they told was often about religion, spreading Christianity, maybe finding a mythical Christian king they'd heard stories about. But the real engine, the powerful force driving these incredibly risky and expensive voyages, it was gold. And not just shiny yellow metal, but the promise of obscene wealth from cutting out the middlemen and getting direct access to the spice trade. So, you've got the tools, you've got the motivation, what happens next? Well, the race is on. What followed was this absolute frenzy of exploration that completely redrew the world map with a speed that is just stunning to think about. Just look at how fast everything happened. In just 10 years, a single decade, Diaz proves you can sail around Africa. Columbus, who was totally looking for something else, stumbles upon two massive continents. And then Vasco da Gama finally makes it to India by sea, completely breaking that old monopoly wide open. It's hard to imagine a more world-changing 10-year stretch in all of history. And it all basically boiled down to these two rival strategies. You had Portugal playing the slow and steady game, carefully mapping their way down the coast of Africa. And then you had Spain, who came in later and made this wild, high-risk gamble. Just sail west and hope for the best. Both of these bets paid off, just in ways that neither of them could have possibly predicted. And to stop these two Catholic superpowers from going to war over all this new territory, the Pope came up with a frankly mind-boggling solution. They literally drew a line on the globe. Everything to the west was Spain's, everything to the east was Portugal's. It was this breathtakingly arrogant act, carving up the entire non-Christian world between just two kingdoms. But these voyages didn't just connect places on a map. They triggered a violent, world-shattering collision of cultures, people, plants, animals, and diseases. The consequences were absolutely enormous, and in many cases, catastrophic. And this is where we have to pause and really think about the words we use. That word discovery, it's complicated. Because you can't really discover a place that's already home to millions and millions of people. For the Europeans, it was a discovery. But for the indigenous peoples of the Americas, this wasn't a discovery. It was an arrival, an invasion, that would change their world forever. Nothing shows the scale of this collision better than what we now call the Columbian Exchange. Think about it. For the first time in history, two massive, completely separate ecosystems were smashed together. Horses and cattle came to the Americas and totally revolutionized life there. Meanwhile, potatoes and corn went to Europe and Asia and fueled a massive population boom. This was the moment our planet became one single interconnected biological system. But the most devastating part of this exchange by far was invisible. It was disease. Things like smallpox, measles, the flu, they were common in Europe and Asia, but completely alien to the Americas. The people there had zero natural immunity, and the result was an absolute demographic catastrophe. Historians estimate that in many places, as much as 90% of the indigenous population was wiped out. It's a number that's almost impossible to fully comprehend. This quote from the historian Peter Mankall really just says it all. Beyond the staggering numbers, the human toll was just immense. Entire cultures, entire civilizations, languages, ways of life were lost. And that was just the beginning. This collision led directly to the conquest of the Aztec and Inca empires, to the creation of massive colonial systems, to the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade, which was started to provide labor for the new sugar plantations. The entire world was being violently re-engineered, and it all started with that search for spice.
So why are we digging into all this stuff that happened 500 years ago? Well, because the world that was forged back then, in the age of discovery, is, in very, very real ways, the same world we are living in today. If there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's this. Globalization did not start with the internet. It started with the caravel. The very first global supply chains, the economic systems that still dominate the planet, even many of the political borders and conflicts we see today, you can draw a straight line from them right back to these voyages. You can see the whole chain of events so clearly. The new sea lanes make a global trade network possible. That trade network leads to colonial empires with new borders. The new crops from those colonies transform populations back home. It all results in a single, interconnected, and yes, deeply unequal world system that we've inherited. The simple hunt for spices ended up connecting everything. Which leaves us with a pretty heavy final thought. This era absolutely connected our world, but it did so through both incredible innovation and incredible violence. We live with that complicated legacy every single day, and it forces us to ask, what is the true cost of connecting the planet? And are we done drawing lines on the map?